Hello everyone, my name is Kamran Rasmus. I'm a Dean of London Campus, for those of you who don't know me. On behalf of the staff and faculty, I would like to welcome all to this wonderful event. There has been two things, if you look at the history of human being, is two things that is quite fascinating. It's one of those things is coming up with imagination and then really turning that imagination to something tangible, solutions, and then solving problems for a lot of people, something that these days we call entrepreneurship. Also, the second thing that is fascinating is the way human actually managed to control the world through technology. And I'm glad that in this event, our speakers are going to talk about these two things. I would like to thank our speakers for joining us in London Campus, and also Luca and Oli for coordinating this event, and Mac team and Solon for organizing the team. Oli will be talking more about the organization of the event, but it's mainly to welcome you all and also speakers to the campus, and hope you enjoy the event. Without further ado, I'll leave the floor to Ntropy, our Director of MSc in Digital Transformation, Management and Leadership, to share with us her words. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. So first, I don't think we need to define it, but for those who may not be familiar, a unicorn is a startup company valued at $1 billion. So as of 2021, there are over 500 unicorn companies worldwide only. And the most valuable is Ant Financial, value at 150 billion. So this is an incredible feat, right? And needless to say that individuals who achieve this level of success are some of the most successful entrepreneurs in this planet. And I'm thrilled to introduce you to a very special group of people tonight. I have the pleasure of introducing you to this group of incredible founders we have here. So Luca, the investigator of the event, will introduce them personally. And you may recognize him. He's one of our own, Luca. He's an alumni of ESCP London, CEO and co-founder of Shop Circle. And I can go on and go on and go on, right, on his bio. But really, since I met him, it's his kindness and his generosity that really struck me, and his genuine care for the next generation of our students. And I could read in his LinkedIn only a few days ago that you said that your mission is to inspire more students to start a company after their studies. So that's incredible. And my mentor a few years ago, a unicorn founder, by the way, told me, don't watch how lips move when people talk, watch how their feet move. We can certainly say that Luca's feet are moving very fast. So thank you so much, Luca, for organizing this event tonight. Thank you to all the speakers to be there. And thank you for the team who organized this event: Victoria, Solène, Catherine, Zanet, Emily, Alison, Rachel, Isabel, and all the rest of the IT and video crew. Thank you so much. So without further delay, I'm going to leave the floor to Luca and the incredible speaker. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Great. Thanks, Cameron and Aurélie, for your kind introduction, and really the whole staff for making this event possible. I mean, it's always great for me to come back. I feel home. I was an alumnus in 2015, and now after 7 years, it's great to be back as a lecturer. And thanks everyone for attending the event. I think there was a good reception, and it's definitely a topic of interest from students and alumnus, right? So those of you who don't know me, because I don't think I teach all the students in this class. So I'm the founder of Shop Circle, company operating in the e-commerce software space. And I'm also a lecturer at the SCP, mostly at the Master in Digital Transformation here in Paris and a bit in Italy as well, from Turin. where I come from, as you can tell from my accent, I guess. So, and really there is only one reason why I teach, which Aurélie briefly mentioned, and is more of a mission rather than a reason for me. Unfortunately, in Europe, most of the academics, lecturer and alumnus, they usually tend to take a different path. They either go to consulting, banking, corporate world, so they never started a company before. Hence, they tend to recommend students a more stable job, right? And in Europe overall, I think it's less than 0.6% of the students that actually start a company after their university. This number is about 5 times higher in the US. And so overall, like Aurélie mentioned, hi Nur, I am pretty much on a mission to reduce information asymmetry, democratize access to resources, and hopefully encourage more students like you guys to start a company after university or at some point later in their careers. And you guys are all business students, so it's easy for you to understand why promoting entrepreneurship can have a significant impact on the overall European economy and hopefully contribute to create our own strong tech hub in Europe as well. And the ESCP confirms once again to be extremely receptive when it comes to these initiatives, which should be, in my opinion, on top of the agenda of every European business school in Europe, really. So I wanted you guys to hear the experiences and the learnings directly from people who have done it before and found the courage to, create their companies and scaling them up significantly. Because these guys here, they hire and employ like several people at a different stage. Some of them did an exit already. So it's great for you to hear their words. So I brought here some of the best friends that I have in the entrepreneurship world and some of the best entrepreneurs in Europe as well. So thanks everyone, guys, to find the time to speak with us. I know that you are all very, very busy. And let's start with the introduction. So it would be great maybe hearing from you guys, like a few words about yourself, your company, and the inspirational process around creating a company. How did you come up with the idea? I will start with Naré. You have the microphone.
I've got my own. Thanks for having us and for the opportunity. I'm Naré. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Ntropy, where we're building the intelligence layer on top of financial data. What we're trying to achieve is create a global money graph, essentially try to understand every single transaction in the world, who the transacting parties are, and what the transaction is about. This powers the global economy, trade relationships, every single business that you encounter, and it's a very, very core infrastructure layer that needs to be sorted out. So we work on that. Should I say more?
Up to you. If you want to mention maybe how do you come up with the idea? I know that there is this mantra of people saying, you need to have a unique idea. Is it actually like this? It wasn't like this for me. So
yeah. So not to sound cliche, but good ideas are everywhere. I don't think it's that hard to come up with a good idea. If you're already thinking of something or working on it, there's probably at least dozens of people working on it as well. We stumbled upon it actually by trying very different things. We were building a privacy-preserving computation layer during COVID, and we raised some money to do that. We were talking to a bunch of people in banks who would use this for sensitive data. And every single company that we talked to said, hey, privacy is great. We have some solutions. How about the quality of the data? It's shit. Maybe you should look at that. So that's how the opportunity came about. It was completely by trial and error, talking to a lot of customers, and then stumbling upon it.
Great. Thanks a lot, Naré. Piotr, next.
Hey, I'm Piotr. I'm a CEO and founder of Uncapped. We provide startups, e-commerce companies, SaaS businesses with debt when normally they have nowhere else to go. The history of a company is a bit different. So I used to be a VC before starting this company, and I basically every day was meeting with founders who were coming to me. They had a good business growing, but not amazing business, but a decent company, and they needed money to hire more people, buy more inventory, buy more ads, and they were knocking on the doors of myself and other VCs, and they wanted to give up, 20-30% of the company just to give more money to Google. And I thought it's crazy, and there should be other way to grow the business. So this is how Uncapped was created. And our product is very unique in a sense that these companies come to us, they give us access to their Google, Facebook, Shopify, accounting software, banking data, and within 24 hours, they get access to millions of funding.
Thanks. Nico next.
Hi everyone, Nick. I'm the co-CEO at ESL FACEIT Group and formerly the founder of FACEIT, what used to be, or actually still is, a platform in esports. It's basically a social network on competitive games, which we merged roughly, actually exactly a year ago, with ESL creating ESL FACEIT Group and selling the group to a sovereign fund, a public investment fund. The way that we came up with the idea, that's actually funny, and it's a bit way less fancy than you guys. I was doing my MBA. I was in New York, and I had started working in private equity. And I felt that in order to be a good investor, I actually needed to have an entrepreneurial experience. And I literally started the company with two of my co-founders that were not in the, didn't have the knowledge that I was starting for that reason in order to fail. So the whole idea was to learn for a year or two, have an entrepreneurial experience. The expectation was to fail. I think it's a funny way of looking at it because you need to put failure as one of the things you're going to have to go through if you want to start a company. And most importantly, it's not really about the end result. It's more about the process. And the idea itself is sort of, you mentioned it, a little bit useless in a certain sense because it's going to change. It's a starting point. It's not the end point. And I can guarantee you that any unicorn or successful entrepreneur or company you see is an idea that 1 million people had, but you don't know about the ones that failed simply because they didn't make it. But I can guarantee you that many people thought about the same ideas we had. They simply didn't execute in the same way and weren't as lucky as we were.
Rafa?
Thank you. Raffaele, co-founder and CFO, well, until a few months ago, of ScalaPay. ScalaPay is a payment company, if you would compare here in the UK, similar to Klarna or ClearPay. We are leader in Southern Europe, and linking to what Niccolo said, it's not about the idea. I mean, we did not invent anything. We simply saw what Afterpay, that is the holding company of ClearPay, was doing in Australia, and we said, okay, why don't we replicate and copy exactly the business? Of course, there are certain differences, but back in 2018, there was nobody in Europe, and we said, okay, let's take a market that there's no competition, or it's very early stage, and then we went to Southern Europe and we did this growth, becoming a unicorn in less than 3 years from creation of the company.
Nur.
Hey, my name is Nurasyl, founder and CEO of Remofirst. Firstly, I would like to say apologies for being late. As a remote founder and remote company, you kind of forget how to put in traffic into your ETA. So I'm not used to traveling. All my meetings happen online.
Even fundraising, right? I mean, I used to. Now VC wants to meet in person.
Yeah. No, we raised all online as well. But regardless, so essentially, as you can understand, I'm a remote-first founder. What we do is we help companies hire employees remotely, globally. One of the things we focus on is making it most cost-efficient. So we allow more companies to hire globally for better pricing. And then I've been remote-first founder for, 8, 10 plus years already. My motivation was to just allow more companies to be able to hire globally. And then because what we believe is the talent is global, and then you can find anywhere the best talent.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I will address the question to some of you because the list is very long, guys. And I will start with Niccolo. So considering how long you've been an entrepreneur for, and knowing what you know now, I'm not saying that you're old at all. I'm just saying that you have more experience than us. Is there anything that you would have done differently when you first started a company? So any specific advice that you have for someone considering what you know now after 10 plus years?
So I think, I mean, there are a ton of things I would have done differently.
Just one, maybe.
Just one. I think the easiest one is probably would have gone for an industry or a product where I didn't have to create demand. We started with a product in a niche industry that was growing very fast, but that was a complete blue ocean, and in order to succeed, we needed to change consumer behavior. And there is nothing harder than changing consumer behavior. It takes years, and eventually it happened, but it took way longer and way more work than we actually thought initially. And maybe if I have to pick a second one, it's probably the team. Doing changes faster. So many times you end up prolonging a decision in the hope of someone redeeming themselves and actually picking up things, or in general, you avoid the tough conversations. Reality is those tough conversations are a favor to yourself, the company, and the person you're working with. The sooner you do them, the better for yourself, the company, and that person as well. And it's something that I keep repeating myself, but I keep doing the same mistake.
Thanks. And a lot of founders are learning about this now, right? When most of the tech companies out there are facing some round of layoffs, I would say. Okay, second one for Naré. So your team is based between London and New York, right? How did you decide to establish your company, and how important is the location of a company in a post-COVID environment, I guess? Is it as important as it used to be? And why London and New York?
So yeah, I think it's not as important, and thanks to companies like Remofirst and all the others, it's become way easier. And for me, I mean, I come from a tiny country that's landlocked, Armenia, and it's just fascinating to be able to give opportunities to everyone and hire globally. It's really important. We started remote because we had to. It wasn't a choice per se. It was COVID. Everybody was in different places. My co-founder moved to Norway. I was living in London, and our customers were in New York. So it just happened that we started in this way, and then we went on, kept hiring, and we saw that we have access to this amazing pool of talent, and we cannot say no to that. Especially now when the economic situation isn't great, I think the markups of big cities like San Francisco and even New York, it's very expensive. They just make less and less sense. And from a talent perspective, I would say Europe is very underrated. Like, people are not paid nearly well enough here. And it's a great place, not that you should underpay people, but it's a great place to hire amazing talent and grow a business in a very sustainable way. So I'm very bullish on Europe from this perspective. We find great people here. We have good people in New York as well, and just globally, but the difference isn't that big, and the numbers are very different in terms of what we pay them.
Great. And that's why, you know, companies like Remofirst exist, I guess. Like, we use a competitor because I didn't get to know Nur before that, but like it's a big advantage to hire in different countries such as France, Italy, Poland as well, where Europe is, where ESCP Business School is based. And Rafa, next question for you. You've built a team of over 250 people, right? Together, obviously, with your founding team at ScalaPay. Any learnings to share with students on how to find the co-founders and how to choose and select early employees as well?
Glad you asked this question, given that we are no longer together. No, but jokes aside. No, but it's a long story.
I know that you are brainstorming around the next project, so I guess like you can probably get inspiration. No. What are you doing now to find maybe like the potential best partner to start a new journey?
No, but jokes aside, to give a bit of background. So our story starts from the beginning of our career, and that's why, it's probably, I think you met with your co-founder here at ESCP, no?
Right, yeah.
And in our case, was not from school, but actually I started my career, I did the classic, finance career, Goldman Sachs, Barclays, private equity before being a founder. And then I was in my early 30s, talking 5 years ago, and I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. And there was this guy that actually did the training with me back in 2010 at Barclays, that continued the career in banking, and in the meantime became the head of fintech at Goldman Sachs in Australia. And then there was my later co-founder and CEO of the company that had only the idea and wanted to explore it and raise some capital. So he went, of course, there to Goldman Sachs, spoke to this guy, and this guy said, look, great idea, but you need somebody to execute the idea, and with network and with financial knowledge. So they put us together, and we liked each other, and we started the company back in 2019. So it's it's not really me choosing, but rather through common connections you create a team, and then you work together. Then 3 years, 4 years down the road, the other side of the story, that sometimes they say choose a founder that is your close friend, or you've done something together, because like in our case, that we were not friends, we just were business partners. We shared a lot of our lives. So when at some point the company grows so fast and you want to do things in different ways, and then you arrive at a point like I'm today, we're extremely proud of what I've done together with the other guys, and the company has reached over 250 people, raised over 600 million euro. So we're very happy about that. But then at the point right now where I'm out of my own company, but ready to build something else, then I don't want to take the whole panel, but we can discuss later.
So next, Nur and Piotr. You've recently closed a fundraising round. Let's call it recently, like 1 year ago, I guess. Any tips on how to raise capital in Europe, and how did the market change over the last year? What I know is that it changed a lot, right? So it's difficult for everyone, but from you particularly, any tips on
Now?
Yeah, or
now?
Like, the market will be back at some point, hopefully, or even if it's a return to the mean, like anything that you can share with students. Because often it's not like, you never have a class when you're a student in a business school on how to raise capital, on how to invest in companies, how VC think about it. So any quick learning, something that can be obvious for you, but maybe it's not for the students.
I think we could have a whole masterclass. I think if I were to start a company now, I think the bar is now much higher. When I was starting the company, it was 2019, same as you. I think it was relatively easy. A good deck, if you had a good pedigree, people were giving you the money. I think now you need to have some proof points, I think. So I think people will expect some minimal MVP, minimal traction. I think it is much harder. And I actually think it's healthier. I think there were probably too many companies created. I'm not sure I can say such a thing, but I think every company was funded. It also created a lot of problems for founders. Like hiring people was extremely difficult. Now I think there is not that many companies being created, but the ones which are created are and will be built in a better way. And I think I, and probably everyone here, had to change the way we build the business. And I think the people starting their companies have to change the way they start their companies. They have to be much more creative and maybe find the first paying customers and actually validate the idea before raising the money.
Makes sense. Nur?
Sure. I would say I agree with Piotr, but on another view, I think essentially what I feel is important if you think about fundraising. There are different factors, especially I would say if you compare US versus Europe. There are more capital in the US, and then some founders say, hey, you should raise in the US versus Europe, and so on and so forth. But I think regardless of your background, if you even just from the university or whatever it is, the biggest equalizer in life is execution. So regardless of time, if it's tough times, downturn times, bad times, whatever it is, if you execute well, and as Piotr said, if you show the proof points, you'll be able to raise, regardless of when is a good time or bad time.
Maybe I'll just add one more thing. Remember that you're building a business, not a product or something. You have to, from a day one, think about the business you're building. And this will navigate you, and this will make your idea and everything else much more sellable.
Cool. And then Niccolo and Piotr. one of these things that you often study in a business school, but you rarely put into practice, is how to shape a culture in an organization. And as a founder, you quickly realize, hey, actually, this is one of the greatest assets that we have to retain talents and attract new talents as well. So I'm curious to know from you guys, Piotr and Niccolo, if you adopted any strategies to establish your culture. I know that Uncapped, for instance, does company retreat, and Niccolo just came back from Cancun, where he flew 1,000 people in Mexico. Any tips?
So maybe I'll start with why culture was so important to me. I think I got very lucky early in my career. I started working at Lehman Brothers. I don't know how many of you know it, but it's the largest bankruptcy in history.
For the bad reason, they know it. Yeah, actually, it was a great bank. I mean, most of the people that
it was an amazing culture, and probably within investment banking, one of the strongest, lowest turnover in the industry, which in investment banking is actually pretty high. And reality is, I saw the bank changing overnight because of bankruptcy. The bank went bankrupt. We got acquired, the European operations, by Nomura. Japanese culture, completely different. And suddenly I saw people that I used to respect a lot, professionally speaking. I saw lions become lamb. It was insane. Like overnight, people that would have worked 18 hours a day and that I used to look up to were unable to close anything. And I realized it was culture. So it's something that I've always been extremely interested in. I think I learned the importance very early on. And I think it actually served well if I think about the merger we just went through. We just merged two companies with 600 employees when we closed the deal a year ago. And today we're 1,200. So it gives us an idea of how many people we had to bring on board, two very different cultures, and we had to put everyone together. And we really started from people first as an approach, and that means looking at culture first. It means building values that make sure that everyone, no matter what company you're coming from, feels very included as part not just of the culture, but the process of defining the culture. The way we started was looking at top performers and really defining what does a top performer have for each of the executive members. We picked a couple each. We decided these are the traits that we want out of top performers. That's what defines a top performer in the company. And then we created values out of that. We included the whole company. So I literally spoke with 1,000 people over a month and a half, going value by value in order to make sure that everybody felt like they were heard. And we announced it in September. And maybe a retro story, we had an NPS score that we use internally to evaluate how good we're doing. That NPS score post-closing was -30. So it was a complete disaster. That meant that 60% of the people, or you had a 60% probability going into one of our offices of meeting someone that hated the company. And on day one, after all of this process, that NPS went up to 10. So this gives you an idea of the trajectory. Still a pretty bad one. And what we did...
Sorry, Nico, that's 10 out of...
That's from -100 to 100. So 10 starts being acceptable, but it's far from ideal. The target we have is 50, which is amazing. And that's just out of announcing and the process of value, and making people feel like they were shaping the culture. And the final step was, as you were saying, we flew everyone to Cancun for a week. And it wasn't as easy as simply giving them tequila. We actually presented them the whole plan of the next 5 years, made transparency one of the cornerstones of our culture, and really making everyone feel like they had an impact in defining that plan. We spent 4 days basically brainwashing them to the point that everyone was coming out of Cancun literally singing EFG, EFG, no matter what company they were coming from. So the NPS survey is out right now, and in a couple of days I'll know whether we made it.
Okay, great. Piotr?
You know, you mentioned we do the retreat for a company once per year, you know. I worked for Google where we had free lunch and everything, and I think these are not the things which define culture. I think first of all, the culture really starts from the top, and this is how the founders and how the management behave, and these are the what behaviors you promote, what behaviors you find acceptable, what behaviors you try to eliminate in the company. And people look up to you and look up at what are you doing as a founder. So, and usually the company is really a reflection of a company, of a founder. We also have values, and we find values very, very important. We have 5 values as a company, but it's not enough to set them. You actually have to really make sure, from my perspective, that you as a founder and a CEO, you really believe in them, and you behave and you promote people who represent these values, and you have to do that in every day. So we, for example, have transparency as one of them, courage, communication, and we have our weekly all hands every Friday, where we actually people nominate people who represented these values this week, and we award them. We give gifts. We praise the people in front of everyone who do these type of things. We do many things, and we could talk about it for a day. But I don't think this is the gift. It's about the behavior every day.
Sure.
Just to add on this, I talked about tough conversations earlier, and values is actually something that helped us a lot in having them. One thing we learned is if someone doesn't fit the culture, you need to let it go. It's not going to work. It can be an amazing performer. Sorry?
It's not negotiable, the clashing with the culture.
Culture is non-negotiable, exactly. And values very often help you in giving that feedback, and actually looking at behaviors and how they don't fit with values is a very good way to actually use values in order to drive culture, especially with, I'd say, those that don't necessarily fit.
I completely agree. And the same is about firing and hiring. Like, we didn't hire some people who were amazing, like literally had a perfect pedigree, had a perfect CV, perfect skills, and they were willing to come from us, from competitors. But we realized that the culture of some of our competitors is so different than ours, we just couldn't believe working with them. And we couldn't give them the offer just because of a culture fit. And I think as a founder, I learned the hard way. I now interview every single person joining the company, every single one, if it's an intern or a C-level. And I have to make sure that they fit the culture when I'm creating the company.
Thank you, guys. So next one for Naré and Nur. So as I mentioned before, entrepreneurship is often discouraged in a university environment, right? Usually you get to recommend consulting and banking because it's the highest paid job. Students are usually broke, at least I was broke back in the day, so I had to go for the highest paid job. But you guys started pretty early, right? So you skipped a lot of steps. With hindsight, I mean, knowing what you know now, would you recommend students to potentially start a company straight after university or relatively early? So just, I don't know, one experience and then starting a company?
I would say my experience of starting startups, I started 5+ startups. So most of them, I would say 3 of them I started during university. And I think that's the best time to just test and experiment. Going back, I would still do the same. I mean, there are different approaches. Some people say you need to find a problem, go to another company, work there, find a problem, and then go solve it. My opinion, I think it's better to learn yourself, because even if you read all this Paul Graham posts and blogs and everything, it's good while you're reading it, but when you actually start doing it, it's totally different. So definitely learning through your own mistakes, starting like simple websites, even if it's, I don't know, just drop shipping or whatever, just starting anything will allow you to understand the basics. So just my, again, advice through my own experience, even if I had to go back and do it again, I would keep starting startups and then learning more and more.
Great. Naré?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a bug. Once you do it once, you will continuously keep doing it, although it's extremely painful. My journey was quite I guess, not traditional, because I started a company, my first company out of university, because I thought I have no choice. I was either going to go back to home, where I was coming from, a small place where I was always or almost always the smartest person in the room, and go work in politics. I used to work for the United Nations, or the only way I could get a visa is actually apply for the entrepreneur visa and do something. So in my head, it was a very binary situation. So I literally knew nothing, but I went with it. And I think what I learned is the risk, or this idea of risk, what you're losing from like starting a company versus going work for McKinsey or one of the big banks or any other job, it's so overrated. And it's especially overrated in Europe, just because we don't hear enough success stories. We don't know enough people who've made a ton of money from starting companies. We don't know enough people who worked for early stage companies and made enough money. But we know enough consultants and people who made money in property. So that's why it seems like there's a risk. The risk reward in reality is very different. So I would definitely encourage it, especially if your personality is humble. Like, it really humbles you. If you're not humble, it's going to humble you. Like, there is no way. Like, you might have been very successful at school, at university, you know, good at sports, doesn't matter. It's going to humble you every step of the way, no matter how good you are at the first stage. Then the next stage is even more humbling. And then you think, oh my God, I've got it. I think I know how this works. And then you're on the ground again and you have to climb up. That's the process. And if you like learning fast and being humbled, then this is the thing for you. I do it over and over again.
And then I maybe just wanted to add something that I remembered. One thing I wouldn't do is to start a startup with an empty stomach. So definitely, if you don't have any money at all, go and have some savings, go work somewhere. I know even if you I worked at Starbucks, whatever it is, so you have to earn a little bit of cash to be able to go through those early stages of startup, because no one is going to give you money until you prove something, and then that usually takes a couple of months at least. For some people, it might take 6 months, a year. So definitely having a little bit of cash, or maybe working at the same time, that is very important.
I was going to say that's what VCs are for, but that's why you need this course, the fundraising course. That's very handy.
Yeah, and that was the case for me as well. I mean, I had to do a job to save enough to potentially start a company and have a safety net of 6-12 months, I guess. And it's going to be the case for most of the students. So in reality, right, how many people do we have in this room? 100. I think 99 of them will actually end up in a corporate. One of them will probably start a company. So, and you briefly touched on this, Naré.
No, maybe, Luca, I want to add something, for the other side, because probably me, Niccolo, or you, we have done the career path, in my case, 8 years between investment banking and private equity. So when I hear, these 21, 22 years old, like you probably, coming after the panel and saying, oh, you inspired me so much, now I want to be an entrepreneur, I quit everything, I don't even graduate. I'm like, guys, calm down. It's maybe that 1% of entrepreneurs that make it. Of course, you need to be hungry, you need to try. Maybe you'll do it on your second attempt, third attempt. But that, in my case, the 8 years that I've done in finance helped me a lot, to have also a structure to be able to do a proper execution, So I knew how to operate. I was not wasting time in details. I was doing, the right things, because also especially Goldman Sachs was giving me that kind of education of delivering in a short amount of time.
And Rafa, this question is actually about that. If you want to, let's assume that you want to launch it after starting a job first, right? Which is going to be the case for most of them. It sounds like, what job or industry or stage would you recommend? It was for you and Naré, so I guess you started to answer the question. It sounds like banking is still a good one to start and get around it.
Yeah, well, back then, yes. Now people would say the big tech, even if, what happened to Google and these other companies recently, I don't know anymore. But 10 years ago, 15 years ago, definitely banking was, and consulting, so Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, that's what we thought was the way to go. Today, I cannot say, I don't have the latest information on the jobs. But also, I think, especially if you know that you want to be an entrepreneur, also pick your sector and choose what could help you more. Like back then, I didn't know that, of ScalaPay or wanted to do this kind of business, But the fact that I was doing not tech, not fintech, nothing to do with banking, nothing to do with any technology, I was doing consumer and retail. So something completely different, cash flow driven, food, but also fashion, apparel. But that second part, the fashion apparel, helped me to connect with so many retailers across Europe. And the moment I decided to launch ScalaPay actually was also because what problem they have, they lose a lot of customers at checkout. I had the connection, so when we launched the company, it was like 10,000 euro of capital. Was even registered in Italy, a small SRL in the province of Florence. We were not really institutional back then, and nobody would believe in us. But the fact that I had Goldman Sachs in my CV, and I knew these people from my previous experience, opened a lot of doors, and that made it ScalaPay a different company versus others where there was maybe a 22 years old entrepreneur with no expertise and no access and was doing a cold call. So that really helps, and if you know what you want to do, maybe use this big company, Goldman or McKinsey, etc., to get you to the customers that you want to target, maybe.
Yeah, which I guess is still the standard route in Europe, right? Most of the entrepreneurs still comes from McKinsey, banking, and so forth.
Absolutely.
I'm going to disagree. Obviously, I think knowing your customers, understanding the problem, having the pedigree and the expertise is very, very handy, and those are important shortcuts because this journey is very, very hard. But I would say, like you said, this is the common route in Europe, and people who are already supposed to do it will do it, and that's very small percentage of people, because once you are in the golden handcuffs of Goldman, there's very few people who will actually make the leap because you have so much more to lose. Whereas if you're sitting in your bedroom eating bread and you have nothing else, what are you going to lose? That's one. Two, I started the first company when it was 2015, 16, and it's not that long ago, but the barriers to entry are so much lower, and they're getting even lower. Back then I was thinking, I need a technical co-founder, I need to learn to code, how am I going to do advertising, all of these things. And if you think about even, getting capital, Piotr's company, you can literally get a website together, test your assumptions, and understand where you're wrong, where you're right, learn all of these things so much faster because the barriers to entry are lower. With what's possible with the new, I'm sure you've heard about it or tested or played with it, LLMs, it's going even further down. All of this stuff is way easier to do. You can iterate, you can learn. So I would say that make the leap, give yourself 6 months, maybe 8 months if you have the runway. Test things out. You will learn more about yourself than doing anything else, and then you can choose. That's my perspective.
Thank you, Nick. It works. I think
Working?
It works.
Okay. I'm going to agree and disagree on this. But
to make things more difficult, yeah.
I think opportunity cost is definitely a big thing. That's why I started during my MBA, and the opportunity cost did have an impact. It was relatively low. I was 24 years old, and if I wanted to, I could have gone back to private equity, losing a year at that age, whatever. It's fine, worth it. On the other side, I think it really depends on the person, and this is actually one of the few advices I gave that I think was really good, actually, to an intern that started in the company about 8 years ago. And she started as an intern from Bocconi, and she had to decide whether to go into investment banking or not. And my advice until then was, if you're a junior in a startup, forget about it. We were 5. I don't have time to babysit someone. And reality is you're going to have to learn on your own. So it really depends on your personality. In her case, she was extremely structured, and she was able to actually learn on her own. I would not have been able when I started my career. Without having done investment banking, without having done private equity, I would have very easily lost myself while building a company. In her case, and I think this counts both as a founder and for early employees, if you're actually able to structure your life and to learn on your own and to actually find direction on your own, I think you can do it early on. Otherwise, I think having a job that gives you that structure and teaches you how to work is actually extremely important.
Can I just say a tiny thing? Just a tiny, tiny comment. This is only for women, so just applicable to women. If you're a woman, start early. And I had a baby when I closed our seed round for Ntropy. It's freaking hard. Like, I cannot tell you how hard it is. And I don't know if I wasn't doing this before and I hadn't already signed the paperwork and people wired the money when I found out, like, if I would go on that journey. And back then I didn't even know that it was going to be this hard. I was like, oh, there's a little human that's going to be born. Like, I don't know what it's like, but I guess I'll figure. I have a company, I can raise a human. It's hard. And because of this, and because our optionality, at least now, is not as large as we'd like it to be, start early, experiment early, take risks early, because the older you get, the more you have to lose, and it becomes harder. And it's not the same for us as for everybody else.
Right. And look, Naré, I hate asking this question, but since you went there, let's stay there. So I remember 6 months ago, we were in Washington, D.C. In a similar panel, and you were the only woman in the panel. And again, it's the same today. If you look at the audience, I think, and that's reflected in the stats that they have, 42% of top business students, they have women students. And whereas only 8% of the founders of European unicorns are composed by women. So any suggestion, I mean, do you think that is actually way more difficult to raise capital as a woman, and any words of encouragement for the women in the audience that may brainstorm about starting a company, but they are maybe discouraged by the number that they see and seeing that there are 4 men and 1 woman in the audience, in the panel?
Yeah, I mean, don't look at the numbers. Who the hell cares? But it is, I would say the following. I think it's hard anyway, no matter if you're a woman or a man, no matter if you had a career before or you didn't, your age, everything else, it's going to be hard. So that's something you have to prepare for. I love what Nur said about execution. I think regardless where you come from, regardless how much money you have, regardless your connections, your gender and everything else, execution is the biggest equalizer. And that's the one thing you can rely on. I think it's a better time for women right now in this market than ever. And here's why. My journey of raising capital, I think if your startup doesn't have metrics and is raising on a story, on a big vision, and people have to take a leap of faith, they're more likely to do that if they're sitting in front of a white guy than a woman or anybody else. Just because there's a bias, they've seen that before, they know how it works, and also men are just more confident. They can talk when they have the numbers, they can talk when they don't have the numbers, they can talk when they know, and they also can talk when they don't. And it's a fantastic skill. The way we're socialized, it's different. So for women, it's way harder. But in this market where metrics matter, and performance of your company matters, I think fantastic time, because normally women come prepared. And if you have the metrics, you can be 9 months pregnant, you can be a woman, you can have all the biases in the world working against you. People will just look at your company, look at the numbers, look at what you're doing to your customers' businesses, how much value you're adding to your customers, the NPS scores, and they will wire you the money. That's just the truth. And I've had really funny experiences. Like, I've had top tier Silicon Valley VCs sending gifts to my kid to get in the round. And I've also had people tell me that in an IC that they can't fund me because they don't think I have what it takes, just from the first moment when they turned on the camera and they saw I was sitting there. So it varies. But again, who cares?
Thank you. And Niccolo and Piotr, I mean, we usually only hear about the positive aspects, like you said, about starting a company, and it's very glamorized because you only speak with people who actually made it, and you never speak with the other ones. In reality, in my opinion, it's probably one of the hardest jobs on earth, and you play against the odd, right? I mean, it's 99 times out of 100, you usually fail when you start as a seed stage founder. So what are the worst challenges that you face every day as an entrepreneur, and how do you keep yourself motivated in this roller coaster, right? Because even after an exit, it's a lot of up and down, right? It never stops. Piotr?
Okay. This is a very hard job, a very, very tough job. And I think if you have to be convinced to start a company, you are in the wrong place, I think, because you have to do this against all odds. And I think every founder I spoke to has this moment where the company is almost dead and you really think this is the end. So this moment will come and you have to be prepared for it. And I don't think you can be prepared, but you have to have it in yourself to face it. And I think it's about there are a few things which I found very valuable in these moments. First of all, to have a support network. I don't know if it's your parents, your partner, your friends, your investors, your co-founder, but have someone you can talk to. Then don't be afraid to have go to the therapy, take antidepressants if you have to. Like, honestly, there are moments when you need them. Honestly, I will admit I had these moments last year when it was so dark, but it helped. Have something that cheers you up every day, like whatever it is. Like, I don't know, going out to the movies, to the gym, doing whatever, but keep doing this. And what I also found very valuable in these moments is to start to treat yourself like an athlete. I think last year was very difficult for many companies, including ours, and our space was very impacted by the economic downturn. And I realized that this is a marathon, and to really build a lasting business, I have to treat myself like a professional, like an athlete. So eat well, work out, sleep, and this helps you manage the business right away. And actually, like, after a few months, I really saw the effect. So I highly recommend that if you can.
Thank you, Nick.
I think, the challenges are many and keep coming, I think. Initially, it's mostly around the things product-driven, the company not working at all, the product being hated. The few times that you actually find a customer, then it becomes more about people issues and cultural issues, management issues. The reality is, I think, they all have something in common, which is the fact that you have ups and downs, as you were saying. And especially early on, the ups are very high ups. I have had times when I didn't have a product, we didn't have anything, even customers, and I was excited about something, and at that point in time, I wouldn't have sold the company for any amount of money. And I've had times, usually within 6 to 24 hours from that moment, during which I would have shut down the company immediately if it wasn't that people depended on me. So reality is the ups are very high, but the downs are really, really low. And the toughest thing is really being able to go through them and getting out of those downs as quickly as you can. Because ultimately, every failure is going to help you build something, you learn out of it, and it's only a matter of taking that failure, processing it, understanding what went wrong, and really rebuild, and the next up is just a few hours away. Nowadays, unfortunately, it takes months because we're too many. And I think what actually really helped me was two things. One is I'm a dopamine addict, and every time something works, I get dopamine. And I love it. I love seeing things that right now are in my head, and within a day, a week, a month, or a year, they actually happen. Seeing that MPS result that I'm waiting for in a couple of days is the work of 9 months, and that's why I work. I don't work for the salary I have. I don't work for the long-term incentives they gave me. I don't care, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but I don't care about the amount we made out of exit. And I sold the company for $1.5 billion a year ago, and I don't care about that. What actually drives me is seeing that number, going in that direction, knowing that the process I followed is something I had in my head 9 months ago. I shared with the team, and we started working on it, and together we're actually getting there. And that is the biggest thing. And I think it translates into an advice, and it's something that I actually received this time. I didn't give it, but I'm going to share it, which is don't do it for money. Don't choose a career for money. You're going to spend the rest of your life, most probably spending between 8 and 18 hours a day on something. And there is no amount of money that is going to get you excited about waking up at 6 and spending the next 18 hours of a day, every day, on something. What is going to get you excited is something you love. So look for a passion, look for study something, whether it's a job on something that you might like, but make sure it's something that it's worth waking up in the morning for.
I agree, yeah.
But it's easier to say that after an exit, I guess, right? But anyway, guys, sorry, Kamran and Aurelia, you're giving me eyes. It's very interesting for me as well. We just have 3 more questions, and then we open up quickly to the audience. So for Nur and Raffaele, I guess you've all raised capital from VC, guys. But going back, would you do it again? Or would you consider bootstrapping the company? And for instance, there we have another professor of ESCP, Gabriel, that has an amazing company, Bootstrapped, over there. And basically, in my opinion, when you bootstrap, you feel very stupid when the market is high and everyone is raising, but then you feel very smart in a market like this one. And I know that Nur, for instance, started some companies without raising capital. So any advantages and or disadvantages of raising capital externally versus self-funding?
Sure, I can start. All my previous companies were bootstrapped, and then for Remofirst, this was the first time me trying to fundraise, so I learned kind of everything from scratch. But essentially, I mean, it's hard to tell depending on industry and depending what you're trying to do, but I believe there are both ways to build a great company, bootstrap and with the VC money. Like bootstrap examples, there are many, but one that comes to my mind is MailChimp. But what I would say is that when it came to me in Remofirst, it was more of understanding the industry and understanding, like, I think there was a little bit of pressure of our competitors raising hundreds plus millions of dollars. And then we were fully profitable, millions of money in revenue, should we raise or not? And I think at that point I was like, okay, if you want to go big or go kind of like maybe bootstrapped, I felt that this is a time for us to go big and then try and scale faster. So I think the VC money, the definition of the VC money overall is not just, hey, here's a Forbes article, I raised the money, but rather this actually going to help me grow faster. So that's the most important thing. So if you believe the money that VC will give you will help you accelerate the growth, will help you kind of eat the market, because sometimes VC money do help you win the market share. Like if you think about different aggressive strategies where people give free services and so on and so forth, that is built through a VC money. Sometimes it's bad, but sometimes it does help you a lot to win the market. So I think overall there is no right or wrong answer. It's just you need to understand the exact moment in time you are with the company, and it should make sense for your company essentially. That's kind of my takeaway out of being a bootstrapped and a funded startup founder.
I guess like thank you to Cristo as well. That is the first person I think that believed in us at Shop Circle was the first check size, and it's something that we share with you as well. So
exactly,
he converted us into VC.
He was the one who gave me the first money, so definitely first VC.
So you know who to ask, going
exactly.
forward. The guy with the beard.
You have to line up for that.
Cool. Rafa?
No, and I totally agree. And probably, the first question, to bootstrap, you need to have the money, and it depends the sector, no? That what you were mentioning. In our case, ScalaPay was a extremely intensive, capital-intensive sector where we were lending our own money to customers that, we were checking, €100, well, on scale, of course, it gets more, but €100, is this customer paying us back or not? And if it's not paying us back, it's not money that is coming in our pocket. So you could not be profitable, because even if you take some small cut of revenue, the costs are so high, and plus you're also lending this money. So the question we had to ask ourselves was, we want to grow and trying to find some loan facility that nobody would give us unless you were paying 15% when the rates were 0 3 years ago, not like now. Or we dilute ourselves, but we start doing rounds early on. Of course, looking back, I still regret giving away almost 30% of the company for $1 million that we raised in 2019 was our first round. And then that $1 million allowed us, to lend money and put a facility on top, hire people, and then do other rounds later on at a much higher valuation. So in that case, of course, there is a regret. We should have raised maybe less and find alternative ways to have a lower dilution, but to grow over a billion without the help of external capital would have been impossible. And maybe one more thing is also when you get investors, it's not about VC or non-VC, but quality people. Like even myself, sometimes they call me and they say, "You want to come on board as strategic advisor for free, and we give you stock options?" I'd rather say, "No, I don't want this. I put 50K myself as investor. You give me, of course, a percentage of the company based on the valuation, but then through what I've done and through my connections, maybe let's build a great company together." And probably this is the people. I'm not selling myself for your companies, but find people that have that can meaningfully help the company rather than finding some easy money and then they disappear and you don't see them anymore.
Yeah, that's one of the mistakes we've done at the beginning as well, to get some advisors with options, and it didn't work out really.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I don't regret that you did that round, given you let me invest.
But I have to say, no, you came on the second round, not the first one. But Niccolo, through his experience, I was giving him term sheets and all the, shareholder agreements to him secretly, and they helped me negotiating, and he has been of a great help and great friend now. So.
Yeah. And I guess, that's the reason why you're active as angel investor, right? Because you made an exit, you create a unicorn, and you actually did it, right? Which is everyone's dream when you start a tech company. And can you share your different experience as Raffaele left the business after the Series B, which marked, I think, the unicorn status for ScalaPay, and Nico selling FACEIT to PIF. How did you feel when this happened? Do you actually feel amazingly, or you just start working on the next objective after that?
I start. As Niccolo said, it's not about the money; it's about the feeling of what you see there. In my case, there were certain dynamics where, as I said, between founders we had different point of views, so we had to take a different path. Would have been in the company, I would have still worked hard as I was working 3 years ago, and probably gets harder. More responsibilities, more people to hire. That you need to care every day. Being outside, I would say, from personally, I would feel as a burden. It's difficult, to leave all the people still working there, because it's a part exit in my case, but the company is still running, and we still need to deliver for investors, and there are families there, people paying rents and mortgages. So I'm super supportive even from the outside. From the other side, for me, is some sort of a blessing, because I'm discovering. And connecting probably what was discussed before. If you want to be an entrepreneur, the barriers are very low right now, and in my case, that I'm considered a second-time founder. I actually have to say no to meetings to VCs, because they're like sharks attacking me and say, "Okay, what's going on? What's next? We're giving you 1 million. Give us 10% of the company." I'm like, "What company?" No, whatever you do, we give you this capital, and it's it's motivating because of they acknowledge what you have done, who you are as a person, and maybe they want to invest in you regardless of what is the idea. Clearly, then you need to have it and execute.
So what changed? I think in the end, nothing changes in a certain sense. First, you don't really realize it at the beginning. I think I remember when we got the wire transfer for the exit, it looked like monopoly money. 1-0 plus or minus, what matters? And the reality is, it's again, if you don't do it first, let's put it down this way. This is a business where there is no money. So the first years, there is no money, like zero personal, and the only number you see is a red number, usually on statements. And once it gets there, it usually means that you liked what you did so much that it doesn't really matter that you're getting it in a certain sense. So what really changed is we immediately jumped on the next challenge, that was merging the two businesses. I don't think we really realized, or it took a few months to start realizing. It's definitely amazing to have more financial freedom than ever before, but reality is I work the same amount of hours on something I love, probably more actually. If you ask my wife to be, she's going to say I'm working more. And you're happy with what you're doing, and reality is that's the most important thing. Might sound a bit cheesy, I guess, but
just with a nicer car, a nicer house, but
nicer house, yeah. The funny thing is, I said I got that advice about not doing it for money. It came from someone at Credit Suisse that was sort of a mentor. And I started my career in investment banking when I was 20 because I wanted to buy a Lamborghini. And so I clearly lost focus on my priorities because I didn't buy any car after the exit.
Great. And just last question for everyone, guys. Knowing what you know now, what single piece of advice would you give to someone starting a company right now, right? And also, like, would you go back to be an employee ever? Yeah, you can go first.
I think I'm unhireable. I think it's impossible for me to work for someone anymore. Just the nature of being a founder just gives you so much freedom that I think it would be very, very hard to go back, but never say never. And I think the advice I would give, it's advice that everyone tells you, but I think no one follows. Talk to the customers. Literally, like, I think this is what I tell to my team every single day. Just talk to the customers every day.
And I guess you're still involved in many of these conversations with the customers as well.
I still talk to the customers every day, and I think I want basically, and I'm pushing my team to do so. It's about the passion. It's about the curiosity. It's about learning from them. You know, if I think the moment you stop talking to them, you lose the sight of what you want to build next, where you should be going with a company next. And I think it's obligation for every CEO, every founder, to keep talking to them.
I agree. Otherwise, you just end up chasing metrics and you lose the sight. So I recently went back and speaking to customers. Nur?
Yeah. So just to add after Piotr, I basically have 3 things that I follow all the time. Customer is the king, so exactly what Piotr said. The second is work hard. The third one is keep swimming. So essentially, you will have a lot of hard times, but you just have to keep swimming. And then as Niccolo, sorry. Nick, as Nick said, essentially, there will be times that tough, but you just have to keep swimming, and then you don't have to do it for money. That's when you will be able to keep swimming and doing what you love. So those are the 3 things that I follow all the time. And then in terms of would I work for someone, I don't know, to be honest. For me, I'm kind of a very open person, and then I don't mind working for someone as long as I believe in their ideas sometimes, or the product and execution. If there is an interesting strategy or vision, I might be able to work for someone, but I cannot tell because I mostly started startups. So I don't have the back experience of saying that, but I think I'm an open person, so I could potentially work for someone.
Great. Naré?
Yeah, regarding the work for someone, I think I'd be open as well. I think it would be nice for once not to have this level of responsibility, and to buy into something and be along on the journey, but again, not have that burden on your shoulders as much. That'll be interesting. But I'm sure I would always go back to founding again, even if I had this experience of working for someone. I would say, like, one thing that I've learned, and I keep in mind, you have to be very fluid, because everything you think you know, then you realize you don't, and it's like this constant process of, you have to adapt very quickly, you have to change your mind, you have to keep the integrity, but be open to changing your ideas and being proven wrong. And then starting early is important, because I think you have to be very naive and optimistic and believe, almost like have a chip on your shoulder, think that there are things that you know better than anybody else, there are things that you can do better than anybody else, that you have this unfair advantages, and that keeps you going. For some people, the passion for what they do is this unfair advantage, because you love it so much, you're going to work more hours. I know people who do it for money and freaking kill it as well, just because they care so much about the money. They think they have an unfair advantage, and they still make it. So I think it's different, but you have to have that sort of naive optimism in you. The earlier you start, the more likely you have it. So.
Thank you. Rafa and Nico, to conclude.
Well, regarding on working for, I think ultimately you always work for somebody. If it's a CEO, a founder, but if you are the founder, there are investors. If you do your family office, maybe it's your wife at home telling you, no, why you do that investment, which I have to face and say, why you not consult me? I'm like, I strongly believe in that investment. Or no, so, it puts in perspective, it's, it depends, you find a good team and then you decide whether, it's good to work together regardless you're a founder or not. Yeah.
I think technically speaking, I'm a government employee given we sold to a sovereign fund. So it's probably worse than being an employee. But jokes, and I'm starting to suffer it every now and then. But jokes aside, no, I don't think I would be able to be an employee. And I think already having sold the business, I've had a hard time adapting. The few times that a shareholder remembers you, it's not your business anymore. That's the moment. The few times are my lows nowadays. Let's put it down this way. Then I find a new thing that actually brings me the next high. So no, and I don't think I don't know how much longer I can resist. But when it comes to advice, I think by now it's pretty clear that I think passion and doing something you love is the most important thing. I think choosing your co-founders and your investors very wisely. It's like marriage. With a difference, you're going to see your co-founders way more often than your wife or your husband. But divorce gets as ugly as a real marriage. And the same for investors. Getting rid of a bad investor is really, really hard. Harder than people would think. And maybe the third thing about capital and raising capital, you mentioned earlier about using it to accelerate growth. I think a common mistake, especially with first-time founders, is thinking that raising capital is the goal. It's not. You're building a business. Raising capital is a mean in order to get to where you want to get to. And people think VC is the only way to do entrepreneurship, or at least that's what I thought. That's the route we took. But there are some businesses where you don't need to take VC. VC money is the equivalent of rocket ship fuel. And if you're not building a rocket ship, if you're simply going from London to New York, that rocket ship fuel is not going to work out for you because you're not building a rocket ship. And that's something that, again, given that it's a marriage, makes it very, very difficult because expectations are different.
Great. Thanks a lot, guys. Aurélie and Cameron, I know it's super late. Do we have time for a few questions from the audience? Yeah? Okay. So, guys, I guess raise your question and they will hand you the microphone. Yeah, we have a few there.
Thanks a lot for your panel. It was really interesting. I have a question in regard to the ID management at the very beginning of the startup. Who do you share the ID with? How do you trust people basically? Because if you choose someone with whom you will share the ID, you might think that this person might steal the ID and then do it better than you would do it, So, yeah. What's your... especially when you don't
share with everyone. If your idea is good, you'll have to push it down people's throats. Because otherwise it's too obvious and actually it's a bad idea. Honestly, share with everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same. Do share with everyone. And again, if you think that there are other people who can do this way better than you can, then you probably shouldn't do it. Somebody else should.
Wait, I guess do we want to do selected people for each question, unless you have anything to share?
Yeah, just one thing. I saw plenty of founders asking me for an NDA in order to look at the idea and invest. Every single one of them failed.
Right. Second question.
I just want to know, if the companies you started were related to your personal passions, or was it just completely irrelevant? Was it related to something you had as a personality, as something you liked? I don't know. something you wanted to do as a kid, or was just starting a company?
I think
Payroll for.
So yeah, I think it was not something that I was passionate about when I was a kid, but I think that having that freedom of working from anywhere you want, that was the part of my passion. And in all my previous startups were remote first before it was a trend. So I think that has impacted me a lot to start Remofirst. Yes. So but I wouldn't say that's the only way to think of the ideas or start of the ideas, because not always you will like, oh, I'm passionate, I want to change how accounting works or something like that, and then so on and so forth.
Well, Nico in gaming, I guess, are you a gamer?
In my case, I guess, given how much I repeated the word passion, it's relatively clear that I am a gamer, and I am a user of my own drug.
Great. Maybe I'll just want one thing. You know what? Being a founder is actually, you have to be passionate about solving problems, because whatever the business you're going to be in, it might change, but the best part is just like you have to face some shit every single day, and this is the best part.
I'm going to say something counterintuitive, but I wasn't really passionate about finance or money, but I always knew I wanted to sit at the table, the biggest table possible out there, and this was the shortest way to do it. That's why I'm doing it.
Great. Right there. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks for sharing, first of all. And I do have one question regarding what you just mentioned about talking to your customers in order to gain the feedback as well as improving your business. But I was wondering, how would you initiate the conversation or any other ways to make sure your customers are not annoyed if you do that every day? And also, because I assume that most of your customers, they are not your real life friends. So even, for instance, even with real life friends, if I ask them every day, they get fed up. So how would you just make sure they're not?
Don't talk to the same customer every day.
No, but like you do have loyal customers, right?
Yeah, but you should be talking to as many as possible, right? And like you go to the next one, and the whole point is like my customers are founders, right? So I try to meet a new founder every single day, and wherever I go, I try to meet them, and I go to the events, and when my team says, oh, this is a good customer, I will, hey, schedule the coffee for me with this founder because I want to get to know them in person,
And Piotr, I guess I'm a customer of your company, so you have account manager, right, assigned to different big customers that manage the relationship. So whenever I have a question, I know what is the person assigned to me from Uncapped. And a lot of companies don't do that. They don't have account manager to manage every single relationship. So that's probably one point.
Yeah. And the early days are tough because you don't have these customers. You have to find them. The first customer of ours was the company called Lestrange. They sell the men's clothes, like mainly pants. I literally went to their store in London and bought the pair of pants and found this as a hook to talk to the CEO and founders to basically get them to talk about the products. So, you have to be persistent and find crazy ways to.
Great. I'm literally blind, so I don't see you all guys.
Just quick question for Naré. So your company, your technology works essentially in the United States, right? So how do you manage GDPR and privacy rules in Europe, if you work in Europe? Because from what I understood, basically what you do is take data from a transaction and then expand the data, right? So how do you manage privacy?
So before starting and solving this problem, we basically had a privacy-preserving computing vault. And we were pursuing that idea to allow businesses from anywhere to share data in a common space in a privacy-preserving manner and then apply computation to that. So that was our initial product. And then when we started doing what we're doing, we already had the setup to be able to cover the privacy issues both on the West Coast, the East Coast, and in Europe. We have different environments. So for European companies, all the data stays in Europe. our servers are in Europe, and for the US ones, we have East Coast and West Coast servers, and everything stays there. But it's still a tough issue. Right now, we even have, we generate transactions, so we create fake data for people to try it before they're using us and before they have to go through this whole process of integrating and so on. So yeah, it was tough, but we were covered from the beginning in a way.
Last 2 questions.
How are you implementing ChatGPT in your daily operation, and how do you think such a tool such as the OpenAI one are going to shape our life in the next 5 years?
Already, we're actually extending the events by 3 hours now after this question.
So, okay, I guess you've got to
probably the most qualified person.
ChatGPT is my best friend. No, actually, I've been in AI way before. So when used GPT-3 and all of that, and I spent probably 62 hours straight just playing around with it with a whole team. We did a small hackathon, and there's definitely a long way to go. But I've never been this excited about technology as I am now with what's possible. What's applicable to us is the following: we are a data company and a data infrastructure company. And the amount of people in the world that can make sense of data today and that can make it usable is very small. I think there's about 30 million engineers or something like that in the world. There's about 300,000 machine learning engineers or people who can deal with data, including data scientists. And what ChatGPT or just GPT in general and large language models are going to do, they're going to make this number way bigger. So you don't have to have a machine learning degree to be able to play with data and get the results. You don't have to even be an engineer. It's going to be way easier, which means for us, our surface level impact went from 1 to 100. So it's very, very exciting. I also use it sometimes to respond to Slack messages, just as a fun thing.
Naré, just a fun fact. If you think that you've been in AI for very long, Gabriel, that guy, I think he graduated with a PhD in AI in the 80s, before AI was even a thing. In 80s or when? Berkeley. Don't be shy, Gabriel. Okay. I thought you were older than that. Honestly. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, Nick.
Maybe a funny anecdote on ChatGPT, and exactly because of what you asked, like applying it to the business. The opening speech I gave in Cancun at the offsite in front of everyone was written by ChatGPT. And because of a mix of myself being tired of working on content for the whole week, and also giving a message, which was that everyone had to start thinking about how AI is going to change their business and the work that they do on a daily basis. And the impact was amazing, because within 2 weeks, we had people starting to suggest new use cases for ChatGPT in different areas of the company, from the life cycle of coding to sales, commercial, marketing, like literally every area of the company. We tested it. We're working on a brand refresh for one of the brands, and I don't particularly like agencies. I think ChatGPT did a better job, and we tested it live on the phone with them. So I think it's a perfect example of how it impacts everything. But I think it's, as you said, it makes it way easier for many more people to start working on it and using it. But it's not, or better, it is rocket science in a certain sense. It takes rocket science and makes it usable for everyone.
I did the same with the New Year's wishes for our investors. So, Cristo, if you receive a New Year's wish from me, it wasn't me, it was ChatGPT. Okay, last question. Too many hands.
Hi, thank you for sharing. So I had another question regarding the MVP. You said it's even more important now to have an MVP to raise funds. But the question is, like, if you have an idea that requires a lot of technical skills, what would you do first? Would you hire like a freelancer, for example, to build like a very basic version of the thing that you want and then join an incubator? Like, I don't know, what would you do? Like, use your own money and build something that is really not gonna look
Yeah,
great?
if I can add, I mean, it's a real question because she's actually brainstorming around starting something potentially on her own and brainstorming to find a co-founder or join an accelerator.
Well, in our case, we actually decided to get a CTO co-founder, so building the technology for us, but also himself, we knew, I mean, we agreed together that he was outsourcing all the development, you know, from another country. And in our case, actually, was Pakistan. We had 10 people working, but, you know, under the direction of the CTO, building what we wanted to have. So we didn't have any expertise on that field. So, you know, we needed somebody coming in as co-founder, but then in your case, it's, I mean, and what I'm questioning as well now for my next venture, right now I'm doing everything on my own, outsourcing directly myself, because, you know, given my previous expertise, I believe it's something I can do. And maybe I will hit a wall one day, and then I would say I need somebody on board. So it's something I cannot answer, but it really depends how difficult and structured is what you're planning to build.
Yeah, maybe as a first-time founder as well, Rafa, which is probably a bit different for her.
And I think independent of technical difficulties, most of companies or businesses, and I would still start by talking to the customers and understanding precisely their needs. And even if you will need the money to build the MVP of a product, it's much better if you can tell investors, I spoke with this and this and this and this customer, and actually they really want this. And if you want the references, you can call them. But I have a lineup of clients willing to pay for it as long as I build it.
Yeah, just to add on Piotr's point, sorry, I think what he's saying is that there's a good saying in product is fake it until you make it. So you basically build a landing page and then drive traffic there, see how many people sign up for that, and then speak to them and then say, hey, do you want my product? Sorry, there was so many people that wanted it, so maybe give it to you in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and so on and so forth. And then that's essentially it. And then I think that's the only way. But to be honest, there's so many things like no code right now. It was a trend a year or 2 years ago. So you can literally go and pay people who can do no code for you, and then they can build Airbnb websites for you, Uber websites for you, and so on and so forth.
I think there are so many ways to test the product without actually having the product. Whether it's, and you can take the value proposition of the product, put it to the real core, and start testing it with customers, as you were saying. And nowadays, compared to 10 years ago, it's so much easier to start doing it. There are companies where basically, without writing a single line of code, you can actually start building a product with some testing and trial and error, which is something that is popping up since 2-3 years ago. 10 years ago, you didn't have it. So really focus on the customer first, talk with them, start delivering the product as much as you can, not at scale, obviously, but that value proposition, and then start hacking around it. At a certain point, find a co-founder. Maybe to what you said, I think having a co-founder is really, really important.
Yeah, does that answer the question?
Can I just add something very, very short, since I think I can relate. I was very, very non-technical, so I have an international relations degree, and all I knew is like a couple languages and just writing essays that now ChatGPT can write. So I think it really depends on the type of company you're starting, right? For a lot of things, you can do everything that was said. I've had an experience of starting a gut microbiome startup. Don't ask me why, but sometimes, you know, the technical barrier, you actually need the knowledge and the expertise. So step one, I would learn as much as possible about the technical aspect. If it's not learning to code, then reading code maybe as much as you can, push it to the level when you say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And then once you do that, then go tech meetups, there's so many places, universities, faculties with a bunch of technical people, and you can have intelligent conversations, and then you can convert them, because a bunch of these people are also looking for people like you who want to go and build something. So it starts from learning as much as possible, and you'd be surprised, how many of those technical people will give you the credibility just because you've done a few Google searches and know what you're talking about.
Great. Solan is giving me eyes, so I guess that was the last question of the event. Guys, for all the students looking for jobs and internship, as we mentioned, starting a career in a scale-up, in this case, because it's not startup that we're talking about anymore, it's a good compromise, I think, and most of them, they share the same idea. So I guess, look, if you, they probably have some openings on the website, despite the year it's been pretty tough for tech. So check their career section, I guess, and you can even write in the cover letter that you were part of the event. So overall, I think it was an eye-opening event, especially for students who often hear more experiences from corporate executives, consultants, bankers, but rarely from founders that scale up their startups successfully. The information asymmetry at university is significant, and I'm sure students will treasure your words of wisdom and all your valuable advice. So once again, on behalf of the students and the university, thanks a lot, Naré, Piotr, Nick, Rafa, and Nur. Thanks a lot. It was great.